The late afternoon sun painted the Franklin County Courthouse in streaks of gold as Judge Rebecca Morrison adjusted her robe, preparing for another day of routine hearings. The courtroom hummed with restless energy, attorneys shuffling papers, anxious defendants stealing nervous glances, and the bailiff's firm voice keeping order. Then, the next case was called. The State of Arizona versus Michael Thomas. Rebecca barely glanced at the file, another assault and robbery charge. But when the defendant stepped forward, the air in the courtroom seemed to shift. The man in handcuffs, clad in an orange jumpsuit, wasn't just another face in the system. It was Michael. Her Michael. Memories slammed into her, childhood bike rides, whispered secrets, pinky promises under the old orange tree. But now, those eyes, once full of youthful mischief, held only exhaustion. Her grip tightened on the gavel. This wasn't just another case. This was the past on trial. What happens next will leave you speechless. Where are you watching from? Comment below, like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the marble steps of the Franklin County Courthouse as Judge Rebecca Morrison gathered her thoughts. Another day, another docket of cases to hear. She adjusted her black robe, smoothing invisible wrinkles as she prepared to enter the courtroom. All rise, the bailiff announced. The familiar rustling of papers and shuffling of feet filled the room as Rebecca took her seat at the bench. Her gaze swept over the crowded courtroom, attorneys in various states of preparedness, defendants with anxious expressions, and the ever-present court reporters and clerks. The first few cases proceeded routinely: a shoplifting charge, a property dispute, a traffic violation appeal. Rebecca maintained her professional demeanor throughout, her voice clear and decisive as she delivered rulings. 20 years on the bench had given her a reputation for fairness and efficiency. At least, that's what she believed. The State of Arizona versus Michael Thomas, the bailiff called. Rebecca glanced down at the file before her: assault and robbery charges. The defendant's history showed several minor offenses, nothing that seemed to indicate violent tendencies. She prepared herself for another routine case, another face passing through her courtroom. When the defendant was led in, Rebecca's carefully maintained composure faltered. The man standing before her, handcuffed and dressed in an orange jumpsuit, was not a stranger. It was Michael Thomas. Her Michael. Her throat constricted as memories rushed forward, riding bicycles down sun-dappled streets in Phoenix, sharing secrets under the orange tree in her parents' backyard, making pinky promises that they would always have each other's backs. But the man standing before her wasn't the boy from her childhood. His shoulders were hunched, his face weathered by hardship. Yet his eyes, those expressive brown eyes, were unmistakable. "Mr. Thomas," Rebecca began, her voice steadier than she felt, "you are charged with assault and robbery. How do you plead?" "Not guilty, Your Honor," Michael replied, his voice rough and unfamiliar. Rebecca nodded, avoiding his gaze. "Proceed," she instructed the prosecutor, forcing her mind back to the present moment. As the attorneys presented their opening statements, Rebecca's thoughts drifted to a time before law school, before her judicial appointment, a time when the world seemed both simpler and more complicated. She and Michael had grown up in neighboring communities in Phoenix. Her family lived in a two-story house with a swimming pool, while Michael's family occupied a modest apartment on the east side. Their friendship had been unusual but precious, formed during a chance meeting at a community center where Rebecca's mother volunteered. "Do you ever think about leaving Phoenix?" Michael had asked one evening as they sat watching the sunset. Going somewhere where people don't stare at us for hanging out together? Rebecca had laughed, dismissing his concerns. But Michael wasn't joking. Even as a teenager, he understood realities that Rebecca was privileged enough to ignore. Their friendship deepened despite the whispers and disapproving glances. But the pressure was always there, an invisible barrier neither could fully break through. The breaking point came during their senior year of high school. Rebecca's father had found them studying together on their front porch. "Rebecca, inside." Now, her father had commanded, his voice cold with authority. She had hesitated, looking at Michael, who stood frozen in place. "Go ahead," Michael had said quietly. "I'll see you around." But they hadn't seen each other again, not really. Her father had forbidden her from associating with Michael, citing concerns about her future and appropriate influences. Shortly after, Michael's family had moved to another district. Rebecca had thrown herself into her studies, graduating at the top of her class and attending an Ivy League law school. She built a career on principles of fairness and equal justice, but she never forgot the boy who had shown her what courage looked like in the face of prejudice. Life has a way of bringing back unfinished stories, forcing us to confront the past in ways we never expected. Judge Rebecca Morrison believed in justice, in the power of the law, yet she was faced with a reality that many choose to ignore. Justice is not always blind. Michael Thomas's trial was more than a legal battle, it was a reflection of how easily people are judged not by evidence, but by assumptions. How many innocent lives have been lost to bias? How often do people get labeled before they even have a chance to defend themselves? This story reminds us that fairness is not just about laws, but about the courage to see people for who they truly are, beyond stereotypes and past mistakes. We all have a responsibility to challenge injustice, to listen, and to fight for a system that serves everyone equally. If we don't, how many more Michaels will be lost in the cracks of a broken system? What do you think? Where are you watching from? Comment below, like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to ring the bell, because these are the stories that matter. Now, as she sat on the bench watching the prosecutor present evidence against Michael, Rebecca wondered what had happened in the years between. His record showed a series of minor offenses, trespassing, petty theft, nothing that suggested the kind of violent behavior he was now accused of. The prosecution painted a straightforward picture. Michael had allegedly assaulted a store clerk during a robbery at a convenience store. The clerk suffered minor injuries, and the cash register had been emptied. Michael was apprehended nearby, allegedly with the stolen money still in his possession. Rebecca studied Michael as the prosecutor spoke. His posture was resigned, his hands clasped before him. Did he really do this? Or was there more to the story than what was being presented? When the court adjourned for lunch, Rebecca retreated to her chambers, grateful for a moment to collect her thoughts. "Judge Morrison, are you all right?" her judicial assistant, Sarah, asked. "You seemed distracted during the proceedings." Rebecca hesitated. Should she disclose her prior relationship with the defendant? Would it be professional to continue presiding over the case? "I'm fine," she answered. "Just a lot on my mind." But she wasn't fine. How could she be when the past she'd buried so deeply was now sitting in her courtroom, awaiting her judgment? When the trial resumed, the courtroom was filled with spectators and reporters. The prosecution delivered its case with clinical precision, portraying Michael as a desperate criminal who had turned to violence for quick cash. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor, Richard Matthews, began. This case is about a violent attack on an innocent store clerk. The evidence will show that Michael Thomas entered that store with malicious intent and left with stolen money, leaving behind a victim who was simply trying to do his job. Rebecca felt her stomach tighten at the prosecutor's tone. There was something impersonal about it, as if Michael were nothing more than a case number. The defense attorney, Alicia Chen, presented her opening statement with quiet confidence. The prosecution would have you believe this is a simple case, but nothing could be further from the truth. My client, Michael Thomas, has maintained his innocence from the beginning. We will demonstrate that the assumptions made on the night of his arrest have serious flaws. The first witness was the store clerk who had been working during the incident. He described seeing a man matching Michael's description enter the store, argue with the cashier, and then lunge across the counter. During cross-examination, Alicia was methodical. Mr. Peters, you stated that the man who attacked the cashier was wearing a black jacket, correct? Yes, the witness replied. Did you see his face clearly? Not really, it happened quickly and the store lighting is dim. So you're saying you couldn't definitively identify the person who committed the assault? Well, no, but... No further questions, Alicia said, cutting him off. Rebecca noticed Michael shift slightly in his seat, his shoulders straightening as if the exchange had given him a moment of hope. The prosecution's next piece of evidence was surveillance footage from the store. The video was grainy and poorly lit, showing a figure in a dark jacket entering the store. The prosecution argued that the person was Michael, but the quality made it difficult to identify anyone with certainty. As the video played, Rebecca studied it carefully. Could this possibly be Michael? The figure moved quickly, grabbing at the counter before disappearing off-screen. The footage ended abruptly, leaving gaps in the narrative. Michael's defense centered on an alibi. He claimed he had been walking home from a friend's house at the time of the robbery. The friend, however, refused to testify, citing concerns about getting involved. As the trial progressed, Rebecca felt the weight of her position more heavily than ever before. She was meant to be impartial, a neutral arbiter of justice. But how could she be when each moment in the courtroom brought back memories of the boy who had once been her closest friend? When court adjourned for the day, Rebecca remained at the bench, her fingers tracing the edge of her gavel. She wanted to speak with Michael directly, to ask him what had happened to his life, but she knew any contact outside the courtroom would compromise the case and her career. As she watched Michael being escorted out in handcuffs, Rebecca questioned everything, the justice system she had dedicated her life to, her belief in its fairness, and her ability to remain objective when the past collided so unexpectedly with the present. The trial reached a pivotal moment on the third day when the defense called their first key witness, Officer David Martinez, the arresting officer. Officer Martinez, Alicia began, you were the one who apprehended Mr. Thomas, correct? That's right, he replied. You stated in your report that Mr. Thomas was walking 2 blocks from the scene of the robbery when you detained him. What led you to believe he was the suspect? Martinez shifted uncomfortably. He matched the description, a black male, mid-30s, wearing dark clothing. Dark clothing? But the suspect in the video was described as wearing a black jacket specifically. Did you find such a jacket in Mr. Thomas's possession? No, Martinez admitted. Did you search the area for this jacket, which would presumably have been discarded? No, we didn't have time for that. So, Alicia pressed, you arrested my client based on a vague description without physical evidence linking him to the scene. The officer's silence spoke volumes. Rebecca noticed several jurors exchange glances. Officer Martinez, did Mr. Thomas say anything when you arrested him? He said he was innocent, that he was just walking home. And did you investigate his claim, or did you assume guilt based on his appearance? I followed procedure, Martinez said defensively. No further questions, Your Honor. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as Martinez stepped down. Rebecca sensed a shift in the atmosphere. Doubt was creeping in, casting shadows on what had initially seemed like a straightforward case. The defense continued building momentum with their next witness, a forensic analyst who had reviewed the surveillance footage. The expert explained that based on height and body type, there was no definitive way to confirm the person in the video was Michael. Furthermore, the timestamp on the footage showed signs of tampering, raising questions about its reliability. As the day drew to a close, Michael was given the opportunity to testify. Alicia had warned him of the risks, but Michael insisted on speaking in his own defense. His voice, though quiet, carried a raw sincerity that filled the courtroom. I've made mistakes in my life, he began, addressing the jury directly. I've taken wrong turns, trusted the wrong people. But I didn't do this. That night, I was walking home, minding my own business, when the police stopped me. They didn't ask questions, they just decided I looked guilty. His voice broke slightly as he continued, I've been fighting my whole life, fighting to be seen as more than what people assume about me. But this. I'm tired. I just want the truth to matter. Rebecca's throat tightened as Michael returned to his seat. His words hung in the air, a plea not just for legal justice but for human dignity. She glanced at the jury, seeing a mixture of doubt, empathy, and uncertainty in their expressions. The final day of the trial began with closing arguments. The prosecutor emphasized the circumstantial evidence, urging the jury to trust the system's process. Alicia, however, implored them to look beyond assumptions, to consider the significant holes in the prosecution's case, and to see Michael as a person deserving of fair treatment. Rebecca listened intently, her face a mask of judicial impartiality. Her role was clear, she could not sway the jury, but she would have the final word if their verdict left room for interpretation. The jury deliberated for hours. The courtroom emptied and refilled as people stretched their legs or whispered among themselves. Michael sat quietly, his hands clasped tightly. He hadn't looked directly at Rebecca since the first day of the trial, and she couldn't blame him. What could she possibly say to make any of this right? Finally, the bailiff announced that the jury had reached a verdict. The room fell silent as the foreperson stood, paper trembling slightly in her hand. In the case of the state of Arizona versus Michael Thomas, we find the defendant not guilty. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of gasps and murmurs. Rebecca tapped her gavel, restoring order. Michael's shoulders sagged with relief, but his expression remained guarded. He had won his freedom, but at what cost? The jury has spoken, Rebecca announced, her voice steady. Mr. Thomas, you are free to go. Court is adjourned. As the courtroom emptied, Rebecca lingered at the bench, watching as Michael completed his release paperwork. For a moment, she thought he might leave without acknowledging her, but then he turned and approached the bench. The room was nearly empty now, just a few clerks gathering files and the bailiff standing by the door. Michael stopped a few feet from the bench, his expression cautious. You didn't say anything, he said quietly. You knew me, and you didn't say anything. Rebecca felt her throat tighten. I couldn't. I had to be fair. If I'd disclosed our connection, it might have compromised the case. Michael studied her face, his expression a mixture of hurt and understanding. Fair, he repeated. That's the thing, Rebecca. The world's never been fair, not for people like me. She nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to the polished wood of the bench. You're right. I wish I'd done more back then. I wish I could have done more now. Michael sighed, the tension in his posture easing slightly. We were kids. We didn't know any better. But I know better now, Rebecca said, her voice firm. And I'm sorry. Michael gave a faint nod, then turned and walked away, his back straight as he disappeared through the courthouse doors. Rebecca sat alone in the empty courtroom, the weight of his words pressing on her. She had upheld the law, but the trial had revealed a deeper truth. Justice wasn't just about verdicts and evidence. It was about the lives shaped by systems far larger than any one person. For Rebecca, it was a profound awakening, a reminder that her position wasn't merely a seat of power but a platform for meaningful change. As she left the courtroom that evening, the setting sun casting long shadows across the courthouse steps, she made a silent promise. She couldn't change the past, but she would do everything in her power to ensure that the future held more than empty promises of fairness. It would be challenging, perhaps even impossible at times, but she owed it to Michael, and to herself, to try.